holding you down and keeping you on point. Breakdown FM, the only station in the nation that's down by law. On all day play. On all day play. On all day play.
Yo, right now, we are on our phone lines with one of hip-hop's pioneers. Not only is he a pioneer, historian himself, we're talking about the one and only Van Silk. Now, for people that's listening, Silk, they may not know your name. I mean, you didn't put out records per se, and you're not on everybody's videos, but people from back in the old school, when they hear the name Van Silk, they definitely remember that name. So for folks who aren't up on it, let's familiarize them. Who is Van Silk?
Well, Van Silk was one of the 10 hip-hop promoters from the beginning of the culture of hip-hop. And in between times when there was no records, up until there were records, I did pretty close to 346 hip-hop shows, along with, managing and discovering the Force MDs and Dougie Fresh and Master Don, the Def Committee, and in the 90s I did the hip-hop's first pay-per-view special called Rap Mania.
Right.
I did do 2 records.
Oh, you did?
Me and Mel did one for Police Academy 6 called What's the Matter with Your World. We was in the movie. And then I had a record that Africa Islam produced when we was doing Ice-T called The Bass Pipe Is Not Your Friend. It was on a small label.
Really? I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man, we're learning everything. And I thought I knew it all. All right. Anyway, let me ask you this. Let's go back into time a little bit. One of the discussions I've been having with you is based around the importance of the DJ when it comes to hip-hop. And a lot of people, we know the names of Africa Bambaataa, Kool Herc, and Grandmaster Flash. They call them the Holy Trilogy within hip-hop. But you've been very emphatic in emphasizing the fact that there are other DJs that were just as prominent and may have actually preceded some of these pioneers that we know. And I wanted to know if you could speak on them, in particular DJ Flowers and DJ Plummer.
Okay. Well, as me and you speak, me and you've been speaking, Dave, that we've been learning a lot from each other. And, from my viewpoint, and in all actuality, that in reality, we had people like Pete DJ Jones, DJ Hollywood, Plummer from Brooklyn. You had Grandmaster Flowers from Brooklyn, Mamboya. You had Master D and Von K. And what happened is those guys are really considered the old school from the DJ era, into which Bambaataa, Flash, and Herc, was like the new school in the middle 70s that transcended, into shaping this culture into being hip hop. Because they was older, and they kept saying, everybody kept saying they played disco records. But in 71, even me and you had this discussion as far as, the Need Awards opposed to Jam on a Groove or Dance to the Drummers beat. They were still considered, disco records until Herc and Bam and Flash and them and Theodore, and Mario and these guys started, elementing the breakbeat parts of these records.
So let's just go back again for people who may not understand. So we're talking about the DJs that you named, Pete DJ Jones, DJ Plummer, DJ Flowers. They actually preceded Kool Herc and these guys, and they would have been considered part of what we know as the disco era. And so they were the precursors to the DJs that we now know as the Founding Fathers.
That's right, because in other words, Herc and Bam and Flash and all these guys had to play with Pete to get some rep, some kind of rep, because Pete was the man. Now you have people like Eddie Chiba and Reggie Wells. When Ray Chandler used to get parties at the Hotel Diplomat, and
now Ray Chandler was another promoter.
He was like hip hop's first promoter. He was Flash on first manager. He had the first hip hop spot for a jam. As from what we're calling it right now in the 70s. Because he was a promoter doing R&B stuff and disco stuff before that. He had Black Door Production, for those who always, hear the name Black Door Production,
Okay.
So when Ray Chandler used to run out the Hotel Diplomat and you had to be 21 and over to get in, he would parlay Flash with Reggie Wells or Hollywood or Eddie Chiba and Love Bug Starsky, who we can't forget also.
Right. So it's real interesting. So we're talking about this division, so to speak, was more along an age line, meaning that somebody who was 21 or 18 would have been most likely to go to a club where, of course, they would hear the disco flavors and all that. And people who were younger, say 18 and under in high school and whatever, they would have been going to some of the street jams, more to speak, and that's where they would have started to hear what we know as the break beats with your flashes and your bambadas.
Right, because we didn't have no place to go until Solid Disco Fever opened the doors and changed his whole concept of Disco Fever for that audience. And when Harlem World was straight up Harlem World was straight up disco. Our parents would go there.
Now Harlem World is a well-known club.
Right, that's where the Kumo D Busy B battle taking place. Everybody played Harlem World.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened was Jack that owned Harlem World seen the hip hop thing coming because the guys from our projects, the Harlem World crew, Jerry and them, who was actually older than us, their brother Randy started playing in Harlem World. So they started bringing in, with AJ, started doing shows there and things like that. Well, we had a club to go to because Jack said I could make money with the younger kids and let Pete Jones with his club P&P and all those other clubs, Nell Gwynn's, where, Nicky Barnes and all those guys used to go to. Let them go downtown. Let them go to the club. I'm going to stay up on 116th Street, Lenox Avenue, and let all the, the young kids come in.
Right.
And that's what Jack did, and, Blue basically was like 17, 18, 19 years old.
So now that clears that up. Let me ask you this. When we look at early hip-hop, people talk about the four elements, the breakdancing, the MC, the DJ, and, of course, the graph artist. How did you see that? Were those things all interconnected, and were those early crews, interacting with each other, or were people doing their own separate thing? Breakdance over here, MC over there, DJs over there?
Well, you know what? In all honesty, like when me and you were speaking the other night, how the South Bronx was a focal point as like the number one ghetto in the United States, where we had Fort Apache. They made movies about that, and they made movies about the Warriors going from Brooklyn to the Bronx, trying to get back home. And then we had the graffiti on the trains, and then you had the gangs with the Savage Nomads and the Black Spades, where Bambaataa came from, and the Savage Skulls. So the news media pinpointed New York as like this ghetto, the South Bronx, and everybody's claimed to have been from the South Bronx. Some people that lived in San used to say, well, I'm from the South Bronx. But, for those who didn't know, they didn't know. But what happened was the graph writers, and me and Phase 2 had this long debate a couple weeks ago. He said aerosol writers, aerosol art, that was really more before the hip-hop culture came in, because people like Stay High, 149, and Super Cool 223, all these guys was writing way before hip-hop even became a thing in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you had Bam and Herc and Flash and Mean Gene, who was Theodore's older brother, who was, and Coolio and all those guys, and Coke Rock and all you Breakout and Baron, it was a DJ thing. Then it became an MC thing. Then it became a thing, people breaking on the break part of the records, which a lot of Hispanic people have kept alive and have really they was the one who was really doing it in a way more breaking, because a lot of the black guys, the African American people didn't want to. I ain't messing up my new pants and clothes, getting on the floor, getting them dirty, But as all four elements coming together, it just so happened. I think it happened because the Bronx was like the number one ghetto at the time, and everything just fell into place, and the foundation's been laid.
I hear that. So that's where we look at that whole connection. I wanted to go back to the graffiti thing. My whole contention with the graffiti had always been that everybody was always written on the wall. And just because you wrote on the wall didn't necessarily make you hip-hop. What you had was people who came from the hip-hop scene that did graffiti. Did you see that the same way, or was it different? Did the hip-hop that existed before the jams and before Bam and everybody have an influence on Bam and Herc and those guys, or was it the other way around?
Well, what happened was the gangs ruled the streets of New York City. And when they started, really getting in there and breaking up these gangs, they didn't have nothing else to do. So getting in the parks and, in every project, there was a DJ with a system. Now, a lot of these guys had never became popular to say, well, I'm part of the hip-hop culture. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So when the gang members used to go to a lot of these jams, breaking, and you gathering, you had your few things, but by 75, 73, 74, 75, a lot of these gang elements starting to get real thin.
Right.
And everybody had respect for each other. You respected everybody's ground. And then being the fact that Bam was, came from the black spades, and he started change that over to the Zulu Nation, and as far as the black people, because a lot of the Hispanics, older guys never really got into hip hop.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, from what I'm seeing, because a lot of them was already pushing 40 in gangs.
Okay.
So it was like more the younger people that Bam was able to reach out to, and then you had people like Phase 2 and AJ 161, and all these guys who were graffiti writers who were young kids too, who was part of hip hop. Because if you look at it, All Jive 161 came from Morehouses, where AJ came from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then you had Louis 161 came from AJ Projects. Okay, then Super Cool 223 came from uptown near Edenwall. So now they was already superstars in the streets.
Because of the graffiti and because of their gang affiliation.
Right. So what happened was the MC would be shouting out a graffiti artist because, he was already popular.
Ah.
My man Phase 2 or Louis Lou 161 is in the house because you was identified by your street.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense then. And then that's when the DJ started to kick in and everything else.
Shouting out. You wanted to be shouted out.
Right.
I mean, it's like you being shouted out made you the man because you was recognized by somebody. Now, for my projects, John Adams, Harlem World Crew didn't blow up, but their younger brother Randy so happened to be the premier DJ out of Harlem World, but his brothers and the guys that brought the system outside were doing this, but they never blew up. So every project got a story.
Okay.
So it just so happened that Bam, Hurt, Flash, and Mean Gene, who all came from different sections of the Bronx, were the ones who got the respect. It's just like a basketball player in Compton or Watts or whatever. Whoever's the man there is going to have the respect.
Right, and he may be just as good as the people that play in the Rutgers tournament, but if we only focus on Rutgers, we might not know about that basketball star in Compton.
Right. So what happened was it was just like when NWA came out. It became this big focal point on Compton. Everybody wanted to be Compton, and all Compton did was what in the 80s what the Bronx did in the 70s. They revitalized hip hop. Then you had Dream Team and Toddy T and all these guys been out already. But now you focus on Compton, then they brought the Bloods and the Crips out, then it brought a whole new element into the game.
Okay.
And then
go ahead.
And then you had Ice-T from here, who was really from Jersey, but you had Ice-T doing the breaking when he was doing the break movies with Mario Van Peebles and all that. And then you had NWA over here. And then, who came up after them? Then you had Compton's Most Wanted. The little children started springing up out of the streets. But if you go back to the day with Egyptian Lover, Arabian Prince, the Dream Team, and all the cats that came out there and paid their dues, all they did was gave them an opening.
Now, interesting enough, because I've been out on both coasts and able to see kind of like the evolution on both sides. To me, when Ice Cube gets on the record and said hip-hop started in the West, at first people thought that was crazy, but, being out here on the West, people was doing stuff at the same time we was doing. Did you find that to be the case with your experience, that cats was out here in the West, had their own scene? It might not have been called hip-hop, but it is today.
Well, I'm going to put it to you this way, like how we talk again, and see, being a pioneer, being in this game, you got to understand everything. If it wasn't for Soul Train, where would popping and breaking and all this really be?
Mm-hmm.
All those guys out there that paid their dues because they was ahead of their time, they deserved their props. Who didn't watch Soul Train at 10 o'clock? Because Soul Train came on national network, so everybody got it at the same time. It's syndication now. So
right.
You watch Little Joe, Shabba-Doo, Demeter Joe Freeman, all those original Soul Train dancers that was doing the dances, and you tried to copy it.
And you incorporated that into hip-hop, called it Electric Boogaloo.
How can you not incorporate Egyptian Lover as a pioneer or Uncle Jam's Army? How can you not? So if Ice Cube made that statement, he made a statement which is 100% legitimate as just what's going on over here, because like I was telling you the other night, who to say what wasn't going on in Chicago and Detroit?
That's true.
We wasn't there, so how can we know?
Right. So what do you think has happened that people had become so adamant in the sense that they only focused hip-hop on one particular area and coming from one group of people, and that was it, and everything else had to follow it?
Well, I think ever since me and you started talking, and guys like me and you are sitting out here, putting out real messages, and starting to open up a lot of eyes and ears to a lot of people, and they starting to recognize that there is somebody out there who's willing to listen to the story. Just like how you told me about the Bay Area in the '60s.
Right.
Can I click 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, y'all. One time to blow your mind, it's the roll call. Cool Herc, Sundance, Grandmaster Flowers, Eddie Chiba, Lovebug Starsky, Junebug, L Brothers, DJ Hollywood, Africa Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash, and long live Keith Cowboy. These are the pioneers right here. Breakdown FM, fresh for the new millennium. You suckers. On all day play.
Hello, I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah, go ahead.
So like how you was talking about the '60s, and again in the discussion, our parents could tell us, and you said how they didn't speak up. But like I said, if the young kids today listen to the records, Shirley Ellis, The Name Game, and Pick Me Markham, and with James Brown, it was just the music in their time, because 30 years from now, the kids going to look at this like, yo, if they don't know the truth about it, they're going to say, well, it never existed. And they're going to keep reading the fabricated story. So when you have people like you, who I respect a lot because of what you are writing and how truthful and honest you are, you're not going to sell your soul to a record company for the dollar, but you want to see the history be for what it is, then I'm with you.
I hear you.
Because I don't want nobody to sit up here and say, well, we did it first. No, the Bronx just so happened to be the focal point of all the urban ghetto. New York is New York. If you came from New York, you was just like a king. It ain't like that no more. And that's what really happened with a lot of the people in hip-hop, because they thought because they was from New York, well, New York is this, New York is that. Well, you know what? Everybody else been caught up with New York and past y'all. And now New York is copying everybody else. Especially when NWA came out, you had to copy Eazy-E and them because you wanted to be like them.
In other words, so a ghetto's a ghetto no matter where it is.
Right, but it so happened the South Bronx was just this big thing that the news focused on because it was New York City.
Let's go back to some of these early folks that we were talking about. Who are some of the earlier crews that you remember? The ones that immediately come to mind outside of Flash. I mean, of course, we had the fantastic Romantic Five, the Cold Crush Brothers, the Crash Crews. Were there some other people that were up there? And how did you think, what do you think their respective contributions to the art form was?
Well, I spoke to Pete DJ Jones with Curtis Blow about 4 weeks ago. He's 62 years old. He's still playing. He's playing all the old school parties because the people he hang with who are 55 and 60 who still can hang, they have their parties, and that's who he played for.
Right.
And he can go back and play old school, and he can go back and play the records we call old school. To them, that's new.
Right.
And he could play the R. Kellys with them because they understand, because they grew up in that era. So when you talk about the CCB crew, people who never really made it because we was younger.
Okay.
And we was in the streets. And, as you get older, language change, the dress change. You're not going to dress the way you dressed 20 years ago. And the language, we might be up with what's going on with the language because we are into hip-hop. But what happened is Pete and them, time had passed, and Flash and everybody else was the new cats in.
Right.
The scratching, the backstrip, and you was younger. And you're not going to be 35 years old hanging out in the park with a bunch of kids when you got to pay your rent at the first of the month. So you had to go and do what you had to do to maintain your life, whereas we was younger, and I'm still living with my mother and father, giving them $30 a week. My mother said, when you going to get a job? And I'm sitting up here hustling for 2 weeks to promote a party and come home with $200.
Right.
And, God bless the day my mom just passed on the 19th of March, but I owe it all to her.
Right.
But the point I'm trying to say is first generation paid a lot for today because a lot of us didn't graduate from school. A lot of us didn't know nothing about this business. There was no record companies. There was no videos, no magazines, no nothing.
And more importantly, there was nobody teaching them. I wanted to get into that, the fact that some of the same problems that we read about with the blues artists and the old jazz artists getting ripped off happened to some of those early rap guys.
Well, you want to know what's so funny about that? We dealt with the same people that ripped off the Little Richards and all those guys.
Really?
Well, who put out the first records? And let's discount Joe Robinson, God bless the dead again, from Sugar Hill Records. Okay, Joe Robinson, whose wife was Sylvia, who had groups, who written songs for Ike and Tina Turner, and they had Ray Gilman Brown, which were the Moments, and they did Shame, Shame on You by Shirley and Company. Sylvia wrote those records. She produced a lot of records. But Joe Robinson, Bobby Robinson, Paul Winley, black independent label owners who went through the 50s and 60s to still maintain something. If it wasn't for those three gentlemen, there will be no hip-hop because nobody wanted to put out no rap records. So you got to look at it. When you're talking about Sutra Records, where the Fat Boys was with Art Cass, that was Morris Levy label too, who supposedly have jerked Frankie Lyman.
Wow.
And Morris Levy's son owned Warlock Records, whose son, generation passed down, who owned Slip and Slide record with Trick Daddy, and the Bloods and the Crips records that's coming out from the West Coast. That's Adam Levy. He bought out Cheetah Records with DJ Magic Mike, and then used to sit home at nighttime and watch the disco dance thing with the guy from MTV. That was Adam Levy and Jürgen Kladush who put out that stuff. When you look at Joe Robinson, who put out mad records from the 50s and 60s, Joe had to borrow the money from Morris and them to put out the Sugar Hill Gang records.
But they said that, that Sugar Hill ripped off some of the early rap artists.
How can you rip off early rap artists when you're putting out only 12 inches, and back then 12 inches was only, $1.09, $1.39, and the average group was getting $500 a man? How you going to rip somebody off? You think that the Sugar Hill Gang record just got played automatically because they loved it or because of the musical background that Joe Robinson had? And I guess a lot of people need to read the book Hitman. Because he used to own Chess Records, but MCA stole Chess Records from him, which had people like Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley, and Peek Me marking them on that label. Or you need to look at Paul Winley, who put out records, or Bobby Robinson, who did the corner doo-wops from New York in the 50s and 60s, and who had Gladys Knight and the Pips, who put out flashing on first records. But what happened was the industry, the big corporations, wasn't trying to distribute their records. So Joe Robinson had to go out and say, okay, I'm going to get my grimy guys, we're going to go and hustle them from the cars.
Wow. So it gets real deep like that.
Yeah, but then you also got to understand, Johnny Soul, who has Soul on Wax, put out Can I Get a Soul Clap? That's the only record he really put out besides the convention, the Rappers Convention. But, that's a big record.
Right.
So you got to look at what Joe Robinson and Sylvia did. They were still a minority in this business. And by them putting out the Sugar Hill Gang record and putting out flashing them and records at Disco Matt. You remember Disco Matt, right?
Right.
What was it? A 12-inch was what? $1 what?
Maybe not even that, 99 cents.
Okay, so and you got 7 members in flashing them. In one period, they're getting $500 a man a week. That's $3,500 a week. That's $14,000 a month.
But
so add that up.
But some of those guys said that they did get ripped off. I remember talking with the Crash Crews, and telling me that they went to other cities and saw records out there that they didn't even put out, but it was being sold, and a lot of those cats got broke, and and all this other stuff. So I mean, was it them not knowing the business, or was it something? Was there shadiness, in your opinion, going on both sides, or what's the deal?
Record business is shady anyway. Number two, Crash Crew only had one hit, and that one hit was with Mike and Dave, high-powered rap.
Right.
Breaking Bells was okay, but still, you got 8 members and 7 members in Crash Crew. Even if they was getting $300 a man a week, that's a lot of money in 1981. Let's look at it. They wanted to get with Flashing Them, you couldn't get with Flashing Them. Flashing Them would go with Freedom in 6 days?
Right.
So you got to look at that difference. Flashing Them came
but
from.
But why aren't those guys millionaires today? Why aren't the Bams, the Hercs, and Flashes? Why aren't they, bling blinging, so to speak, living in those big houses and, living the lifestyle that's often depicted in the videos?
Well, I could look at Melly Mel. He may not be a millionaire, but he ain't got to worry about. I look at Mel, who written a lot of songs for for his group. Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five.
Right.
You know, and then Mel did outside projects. He don't have to worry about eating, not eating. Then I look at people like Kool Moe Dee and the Treacherous Three, who had 3 or 4 records on Sugar Hill Records. Because you got a lot of play doesn't mean you sold a lot of records. Okay, because at that time there might have been 20 hip-hop records out.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, you're going to get play because you was itching to play records. I mean, there was a time, at one point, Mr. Magic would play a record 2 or 3 times in one night because you have so many records.
Right.
So, if they felt that they was robbed, then that's something that I feel that they have to take up within their lawsuit if they still have one. But I can't see you getting robbed when you're putting out only 12-inch records. The Treacherous Three never released an album on Sugar Hill Records. Neither has Flash released one album. Busy Bee never released an album. Spoonie G's never released an album. And the Funky Four never released an album on Sugar Hill because you lost KK Rockwell and Lil Rodney C when the group switched over.
Right.
And they became Double Trouble. So the average one of those groups, besides Flash and them, basically did 7, 8 records. And at that time, Run DMC came in, and it was a whole new change of guards.
Hmm.
You can ship a lot of records out, but then there's also a thing called midline prices also when records get on the shelf. And they also got to understand when you go and you're getting $300 a week, and there's 6 members in the group, that's $1,800 again. That's $7,200 a month for the Crash Crew. And then if that's in advance, and then you're going out, how much could you have been getting paid to perform? No more than $1,500 back then. $2,000, maybe $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't add and subtract. So that's why a lot of these groups today, and I love them all, are in this financial bind they are now. As for Bambaataa, he's totally different because Bam is he's self-independent. Bam can work and still work. Curtis still work. But they got to understand, put the microphone down and stop trying to compete with the young kids. If you want to go out and do your shows and perform, do that. See, the Sugar Hill Gang understand we ain't got to make new records. We can just keep performing off the records we got.
Right, because there's always an audience for it.
Right. So why, and the question is why they're not millionaires? Well, I'm only going to answer this question in all honesty. They're in no worse a shape than the artists today making records because you have a lot of them that selling a lot of records that ain't going to be millionaires when it's all done and said. But if they want to live comfortably and live nice, then they need to sit down and make their plan on how we want to live,
So let me ask you this. From what I'm gathering, that first generation of record makers did not have mentors, so to speak, sitting down and laying out the game the way that you kind of laid it out there.
Well, if you're getting $3,000 to cut a 12-inch record, or
right.
even if you got $3,000, you might have got $2,000 to cut a 12-inch. What lawyer is going to take you on? First of all,
well, not necessarily lawyers, but I'm talking about people who had gone through that business.
No.
And what I'm getting at is that, so now you have a whole generation of people that have gone through that, right? That do they mentor, or have they been invited to mentor? Have they been able to break bread with some of the newer cats that are coming up since they're in the same type of position? Even though, like you said, back then you might have had a record played, but it wasn't selling. Today you might have a video where you have a rented Lexus and a mansion that you rented so that you're not getting paid, so you're still in the same shape. But it seems like that is continuing on, that black artists, so to speak, not getting what they're supposed to based upon what they created. Are we not passing the game from one generation to the next?
It's still the same. It's just more money involved. And there is no mentor. Nobody sat down and said, well, listen, fellas. I mean, I think at one point the Robinson tried to do it. And then when you borrow money to start Sugar Hill Records, then you still got to pay it back and trying to survive in this game because now everybody's seeing, okay, here this black man making this money, and we got to find a way to get a piece of this money. And he might have hurt the company, then he might not have hurt the company. But me and Mr. Robinson had long talks about it. He's like, listen, man, you don't know what I went through to keep this company going. Going up to this radio station and smacking Frankie Crocker. To make him play Melly Mel and them record. And God bless the death of Frankie Crocker. I mean, because I'm talking about two people who's not here, but this is actual what happened. I mean, Mel can vouch for that because me and Mel went with Mr. Rob when he went up to the station and said, when I come back downstairs, that record will be on the radio. And sure enough, it was on the radio. But we came into this game of the old school record people who do not want to pay black artists. Just like Donald Goines' family is still getting 12 cents a copy for each one of his books still sold to this day.
Wow.
And that's in the new, like in the new Feds magazine. His sister said we're still getting 12 cents a copy because of the contract he signed. But see, the whole thing about this business is either you're going to oblige by your contract or record companies can suspend your contract. And you can't eat at all.
Wow.
And Melly Mel's contract at one time was suspended. That means Mel and them couldn't do no records with nobody. They couldn't eat. So what happened is the first generation came in, and I'm excluding the Robinson, because you had to deal with the one-stops that don't exist no more, that was black-owned. Because the corporations said, listen, if we don't get a piece of this, we're not going to sell your one-stop distributor any of our product. So Bobby Robinson used to have a one-stop on 125th Street and went under because the major labels wouldn't give him no credit.
Man.
So that's how they treat black music. I mean, to this day, you got SoundScan, but SoundScan don't mean to, especially when you got a cassette single going on for 99 cents or 49 cents. Who can't scan 1,049,000 cassette singles? And then the artists want to know why they didn't get paid.
Mm.
So the difference from then is that the snakes you got today are wearing suits, opposed to the snakes that you had back then that ripped off the Chuck Berrys and the Little Richards and all them guys. I mean, you look at the Fat Boys. Art Cass, Morris Levy, they own New Brunswick Records and Suture Records and all these record labels. They had a big thing called Seven Label Corporation. So if you knew what happened to Frankie Lyman, and we came into that era when those guys was on their way out, but they still had their hands into something because they had old money. Just like the people that own Nervous Records, or the people that own Sleeping Bag, Juggy Gales and them. They were old-timers that had been in the business a long time.
And so today, like you said, a lot of these old guys might have passed the business along to sons and daughters and nephews and mentored some up and comings, but they're still playing the same game just with different names and maybe, instead of $2 you might get $5.
Okay.
But they went up in what they make.
Okay, Sam Weiss, the own Nervous Record, is related to Barry Weiss and Juggy Gales and all his family. It's all family. The Rifkins. I used to work for Spring Records. You got Roy Rifkin, you got Jules Rifkin. Jules Rifkin's son is Steve Rifkin. Then you got Steve Rifkin's brother, Randy Roberts. And his brother, the other brother is a lawyer, Jamie Roberts. They're not using the Rifkin name, they're using Roberts. But you don't know their family.
So what
because the Rifkin's hands were so deep in the industry back in the day when they had Joe Simon and Millie Jackson.
So what do you think needs to happen? What do you think the black artists, especially today, need to do to change the course? And have they been changing the course? When we look at the Master P's and the Sean Puffy Cones and the Jay-Z's, I mean, have they changed the game, or is it still the same old game? Just it's dressed up different.
There's only two record company people in this whole hip hop business or rap business that's making rap records, and they're not even from New York. Master P is one, and James Prince is the other. Everybody else don't count. They work for the record labels. Master P cuts his own records. He don't spend $500,000-$600,000 budgets. He don't spend ridiculous video money, and he owns all his stuff. James Prince owns all his stuff. They call they shots.
Right, but I'm also hearing that Master P doesn't own his stuff anymore.
Well, it's depending on the situation that went down with Brian Turner, who sold, Priority Records to EMI. Now EMI is dumping the label over the Capitol, who haven't had a hit since Hammer. Who knows? And I mean, I look at the Cash Money deal. I mean, Universal made their money back off Juvenile and the Hot Boys, and they gave them the whole catalog to put out. So we haven't learned. I mean, if you ask any artist, you pay for your video, you don't own it.
But you paying for the video.
Yeah, you don't own your video, but you arguing about the next man trying to pump you on the street, even the mixtape DJs pushing you, but you don't own your video, which if you spend $1 million for your video and you paid $800,000 of it back, you don't own the video. You don't own the masters that you record on. The record company owns them. And who are the record companies? They're not even record companies no more. AOL owns Time Warner. Bertelsmann is a privately owned label which owns RCA, BMG, Arista, you call it. A black man has no shot in this business. You think a black man making $600,000-$700,000 a year, that's tax write-off to them.
So what do we do to turn that around?
We don't need Puffy don't need Arista to make records. Puffy can make his own records.
But will he get it played? Will he get the MTV exposure? Will he be a household name if he doesn't go through those channels?
Let me ask you a question. The problem with us being black is that we don't know how to stick together. If we say we're going to have an all-blackout week in hip-hop, ain't no record label going to make no money. But we're dealing with Uncle Toms. They scared because they never had nothing. So they're scared of not never having nothing again. But it's going to come a time when they say, and excuse my French, all Negroes go home. Because we don't control even the urban division that labels no more. They got rid of all of them 5 years ago in the Andre Harrell era because everybody was worrying about who's driving what and not taking care of business. As I was telling my daughter the other day, there's only one artist who ever record's going to ever be recorded or recovered 10 years from now, and that's Babyface or R. Kelly. Ain't nobody else want to sing nothing else anybody's singing today. They look at us as a joke. So, they know that they're dealing with people who never had nothing. If you take it away from them, then they're going to go and start committing crimes. I mean, Bad Boy Record is not owned by Puffy. He owns part of it, but he's a worker. He's working to keep his record label going. But Master P's in a much better position than he is. And I love them all. But if you look at the bottom line, when Def Jam was sold, Leo Cohen is running Def Jam Island, not Russell. Can we figure that out? Or can we figure out why Master P could sell $300-400 million in records, but he can't get the black job of running Capitol Records, which haven't had a hit in years? Because you know why? Because the industry is scared of a real black man who has his own mind. So they're going to hire Uncle Toms who going to follow the guidelines and not step on their shoes. So when you see somebody like Suge coming out there and doing what he got to do, Suge understand what he do. I mean, I applaud everything he does, but as from a record standpoint, he only doing what was taught to him. Because they did it. They used to make black artists hang them out over the ledges and do whatever else they need to do to get their publishing. Or if you look at the movie Five Heartbeat, what Big Red did ain't nothing no different than they doing today.
Wow.
Ask how many artists who own a domain to their website. Because in Columbia record, that's mandatory. You give that up. That's not even an issue. But then again, corporations run the record industry. How many radio stations got, the best in hip hop and R&B? Same slogan. So now you got all these white consultants running around here consulting black radio stations, and you ain't got not one black man running around here consulting a pop station. So what are we doing? We're sitting up here working for them again. So what we need to do is go and get that poster that used to be in the South in the 50s with your hair looking like buckwheat eating watermelon, because that's where we at right now. Spitting out watermelon seeds. But they just giving you a little bit of money to dangle with.
Man, this is real talk here. My man Van Silk. I just called you, man, to get some hip-hop history, man, but we getting a lesson here.
I mean,
man, and it's a sobering one. It's a sobering one that people got to really take into account. The question is that I keep coming back to, understanding that it seems like now even more important that people really involve themselves with some of those organizations that can be activists or political, so that there can be both strengths in numbers and strength in resources and combat this. It's the same game, different names, huh?
Well, can I say this, Dave?
Yeah.
I want to make 2 points, and whatever you want to ask me after this is cool. Can you believe that the same person is still leasing cars to black artists over here for the last 15 years?
Really?
Yeah, if you got a record deal, you can get a lease Bentley or whatever. The same person. And what happened is...
Oh, people are leasing those things?
A lot of those cars are leased. Like when they took back Jody C. 6 cars. You're paying $4,000 a month for a Bentley, but you got to understand something. If you look at the majority of the big corporation marketing division, they're run by white people. And it's not about being whether you're white or black, but then you get steered, oh, my friend got this leasing company, we can get your car tomorrow. As long as you got a record contract, you can get a car.
Oh, boy.
Now, This go back to the days when Melly Melon was getting their cars leased and Sugar Hill leased their cars for them. But it's the same person in Jersey that's leasing the cars. The same person. There's one accountant that everybody used to run to. I don't want to say his name because I don't want nobody to stop trying to sue. But you know what? He steered everybody to his people. They lease cars. Because you know one thing about a car? You can always get it when you want it. You always get the car back.
But see, the thing I'm trying to figure out, don't a lot of these guys realize that, or they just don't care, or what, or they just, I don't understand.
Well, what happened is when you never had anything, you want to impress a girl. So a black man feeling by having on jewelry and money in his pocket and flashing, that's making him who he are. I always found out you are who you are, regardless of what you're wearing or what you got on. Because the person that really have something, and Bill Gates got more than everybody combined, and look how he looks.
He ain't trying to impress nobody.
Or look at Bill Cosby or Oprah Winfrey.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to have the money Bill Cosby got. Bill Cosby gave away more than you ever going to get in your lifetime.
Right.
But see, they don't understand that we, again, are in a subtle state of the industry. Everybody's fighting for the 10 slots that's available.
Right.
Okay? And there's only 10 slots available. Now, I'm going to take Jay-Z, for instance. Jay-Z right now, to me, is like, he's on such a roller coaster right now, there's no stopping him. But he followed the blueprint. And the blueprint was, he only did what Biggie and Tupac did. But he know how to make money because now he's 50%. He owns his record label. So whatever he gets, Def Jam split with him.
Hmm.
You know, so he's making his money. Now, what he do with his money is another thing, but he's Jay-Z. Jay-Z paid this dude for the last 15 years.
Right.
Okay, so you're not going to make money overnight unless you Eminem, unless you're a white rapper and you want to be accepted by MTV, or unless you NSYNC, and then the record company's got to tie in with Fox Family Channel where they can keep you on all Saturday evening and throw Aaron Carter on TV all Saturday evening, and then, you know, we got a concert coming up next week. We don't have that for black music, where you could have pushed groups like Immature when they was young, or Imagine, you know, or Lil Bow Wow. Now, he might make Fox Family Channel, but as long as they got NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and Aaron Carter, if you ain't light-skinned black, you ain't getting on.
Well, you know, for people that's just checking this out, this is my man Van Silk. Silk, I'm gonna have to stop this right now. Man, this is some deep stuff, man. That's a lot to think about.
WBRKD Breakdown FM, where we break down news, views, and the hip hop movement.